Hi everyone, it's Rena. So this video is about games that Leo plays. And I've been doing a series on the games that different signs play. And it's kind of riffing off of a book that came out in the 1960s by, I think he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist maybe, named Eric Berne, called Games People Play. Very popular book. And the different manipulations that people engage in to avoid intimacy. I can't remember exactly why he said that people do it, probably multiple reasons, but I would say that people who cannot interact with others in a very authentic way and that they will substitute that for some kind of manipulation, ulterior motive, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of times, I think this is because the person doesn't know how to really relate to people. So they tend to objectify people. They tend to see people as, it's almost like pawns on a chessboard or something. And so different signs do this. I had like a field day with the water signs because a lot of times water signs are looking for love, but they go about it in very self-destructive ways. Obviously, I'm not talking about all water signs or all people that I bring up here. It's going to be the ones that have issues. And with Leo, Leo is a fixed water sign, fixed fire sign. And the fire signs, it's a little bit difficult to talk about games that they play because a lot of times fire signs are pretty authentic. But that doesn't mean that they can't also be problematic in their dealings with other people. They can be, and they are, if they're not balanced, if they're not evolved. For Leo, there's this need, I'm talking about the lower version, a need to seem important, a need to be admired. And so a lot of times the Leo person will create this buzz around themselves that they are the greatest thing since sliced bread. There's a lot of bragging. There can be kind of the ostentatious behavior, the, maybe with status symbol items, if they try to show off via money. And sometimes, people don't always have the money that they're claiming to have. And so they kind of front, if you will. And the whole idea is to make themselves seem successful, important, better than others. And so there can be that arrogance, that superior attitude that how they engage with other people. Now, if they're engaging with somebody who has low self-esteem, that person may mistakenly believe that they are inferior to this individual. And by the way, I'm not saying that the Leo person may not be completely, utterly talented. I think that a lot of narcissists, because let's face it, this is definitely narcissistic behavior, are very talented and accomplished. And that's not true 100% of the time, obviously, and that would make that person need to engage in this behavior, especially if they have ambitions that have not been satisfied. But even people who are accomplished, that doesn't mean that they have to act as if they're better than other people. Or if somebody is wealthy, that doesn't mean that they have to treat people who are working class as lower than them in value. So it really doesn't matter what the truth is about that Leo person's accomplishments or their status, they're going to do it regardless if they're not balanced. And it's also, to me, a defense mechanism, because they really don't feel good about themselves. And when somebody has low self-esteem, it doesn't always mean that they're going to hurt other people. Sometimes people hurt themselves more than they ever hurt somebody else. Like, they drink too much, or they take drugs, or they get involved in destructive behaviors, like people who treat them badly. But some people definitely take it out on others in one way or another, and that is when it crosses the line and becomes other people's problems. I should say problems in the plural, because there can be multiple situations where this occurs. So let's say we're talking about a boss who does this. The boss may act like the employee is very unskillful, ignorant, never good enough. There's like that tyrannical type of behavior. And what happens a lot of times is it can be quite demeaning to that individual. Now, this is also an abuse of power in this particular situation, because the employee may feel like they are dependent on that job, that they just can't up and quit. And we could say the same thing of a Leo person who is a parent who's imbalanced, and they abuse their child by implying that their child is incompetent, not bright, not talented, and setting themselves up, or kind of putting themselves up as superior, and that kind of thing. And again, this is an especially egregious form of abuse of power, because it's happening from birth. And a child who is raised by that parent from birth is easily indoctrinated into that false belief that they are not okay, that there are many things wrong with them, that they're not good enough. And remember, too, that Leo is right by Virgo. And so that can also unleash those critical tendencies if the let's say the Leo person has Mercury in Virgo, the moon can be any sign, but let's say the person conveys this critical attitude towards a child, and it's like mercilessly critical towards the child as they're growing up. That child can easily grow up with an inferiority complex. And this is exacerbated if the Leo person is successful, because it's hard to argue against that if that person can show that they are successful. So it's so tricky in that sense. But let's see, what else can I say about this? There can be a tendency to want to be seen as the cream of the crop. The star, they call it star effer, or the person who's looking to be part of the A-list. I was going to say, if the Leo person has the moon in Capricorn, they may really look at life in terms of a hierarchy and want desperately to be in that elite group. But what can happen is that again, they're looking at people as commodities. They're not looking at people as individuals to respect, to treat like they are some kind of valuable individuals. They are a means to an end. And again, the point is that these people are being used by the Leo to make them look better, to impress others. So that's the other aspect of this, impressing other people. Look at me, gaining attention. The Leo person may engage in getting attention-seeking behaviors, and that can run the gamut. So the competitive angle, I would say too, with Aries, I don't know if I did Aries yet, but there's that competitive angle sometimes where the person wants, but I'm talking about Leo now, the person wants to be the center of attention. And so whether it's the kind of clothing that the person wears, the behavior, they don't want to share the spotlight. And so anybody who is charismatic is somebody who naturally has eyes on them. That will be Leo's target. So a Leo mother can look at her daughter as her rival. If she is undeveloped, if she is insecure, she may see her daughter as her rival, and she may try to compete with her daughter, even if they have like a 20-year or 25-year, 30-year age gap. And if they, if she was a teenage mother and they have less of an age gap, oh my gosh, because again, I mean, if the Leo person feels second best, doesn't feel like they're the center of attention, then they feel like chopped liver. They don't feel like they're all that. And a Leo person, be very careful of an ignored Leo person, because they're like, they could be bad news if they are not spiritually advanced, if they are really in the world in a big way. Because the ego runs the show. When people are not in tune with their higher nature, the ego runs the show, and it won't end well when the ego runs the show. So how do you deal with such types of people? This can be particularly difficult because the Leo personality it tends to be very loud and domineering, that it can feel very exhausting to even deal with this sort of person. Even if you are able to confront them, that you're not afraid of them, it still can be very draining, because they can be just a handful in terms of their basic, approach or behaviors. So the thing is that you have to ask yourself, why do I want to continue in this relationship? Do I think that I'm obligated to do so? Obviously with parents, it's one of those things, you feel like, hey, that's my parent. And I guess it also depends on how adversely it impacts you. Maybe if this is like a friend of yours and you don't really stay in touch, you've kind of drifted apart, and you just see them at on holidays or whatever, maybe once a year, and even though you find their behavior atrocious, you can take it or leave it. It's not going to be the end of the world. But in some cases, the relationship is fairly close and you feel like you're having to be exposed to this person way too often, and it really impacts you negatively. Well, I definitely do not believe in having relationships with people who are highly toxic. It's it's kind of like a fine line depending on the nature of the relationship, but in general, give yourself permission to choose relationships that are nourishing instead of draining. You know, you have every right to. If this is a parent that you're dealing with, perhaps you can go low contact, which is the next best thing to totally not talking to them. And there might be some of these types of people who are not even aware that you are distancing yourself from them because they're just so self-centered. If you're subtle about it, they may, like, I have said before, like, let's say this is a friend, but you are seeing them more regularly, you can simply stop, returning their calls immediately and kind of starting spacing it out to get them used to you not being so responsive, and phasing out your contact with them very slowly. My partner said something to me. I don't know if he made this up. I don't think he did, but it's like, never let somebody know that you broke up with them. I think I've read that somewhere else. But that's such great advice. I mean, it doesn't always work, but I mean, when it does, it's great. So you just kind of like start distancing yourself little by little until it's just kind of this very occasional contact that you engage in. It's funny because I just realized something with the other signs I have brought up, just being honest about the situation at hand and explaining why you react the way that you do to their behavior or what have you. And for some reason, I completely uh, avoided that with Leo. And the reason I might have done so is because there are certain signs that I feel like you can't necessarily communicate like that and have them respond to you in a very like detached kind of way. They might tend to get very offended, for instance, and then cause a scene. And that's another thing too with the Leo, and I think also Aries can do that, where they can kind of be a little bit scary if they have a nasty temper, like a temper that tends to flare up, maybe suddenly sometimes. And there's that tendency to be intimidating because of that. And that's a manipulation. If somebody's intimidating, they're trying to scare other people into submission. And so, while I would never say, don't let somebody get away with that, because, if somebody's dangerous or if you feel like they're a powder keg, then there could potentially be a big danger in dealing with somebody who is, very easily triggered. But in general, I would say if you are dealing with a very problematic Leo in your life, that you don't even bother trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to change. First of all, they're a fixed sign, so their chances of changing substantially, at least in the short term, are probably slim to none. And the possible negative impact on you can be so great that you want to avoid them right away rather than within a year or two. And the other reason, which is kind of like really part and parcel of what I just said, is that if they are very egotistical, they're going to have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. So it's really more about how do you extricate yourself from the situation. And it's going to depend on the type of relationship we're talking about. And you have to proceed with caution, because a person who is scorned, who feels scorned, I should say, can be the kind of person who contacts various entities in order to try and get back, kind of like seek revenge on the person who dared to insult them. Also, if this individual has the moon in Scorpio, they can have even more of a vengeful nature. I think somebody with the sun in Leo might be capable of having the moon, having Mars in Scorpio. So that's another example. And you just want to make sure that you're not exposed to that individual again. And that's the real objective above all else, because chances are there's not going to be a middle ground. There's not going to be a compromise. Okay, well, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.